Hello, welcome, and welcome back to the Marni On The Move podcast. I am your host, Marni Salop. Today on the podcast, I'm syncing up with Ryan Calilung, Head of Product Development at Cervélo. Ryan has a long career in product development and engineering and a cycling life and career that go back even farther. Ryan and I sync up today about Cervelo's new Rouvida E-Bike, all the bells and whistles, and what Cervelo is bringing to the cycling scene with its latest innovation, from design to sustainability. Ryan shares where cycling began for him and where he is now. We also do a bit of a deep dive into cycling, tech, and gear. I get an inside look at some cycling events on Ryan's calendar and more. I'm sure you're going to love this conversation. Shout out to our partners today, Ketone IQ. More about that later. Now, on to our conversation with Ryan. Obviously, you're kind of passionate, You're passionate about cycling.
Yeah.
How'd you get into cycling? Like, when did it start for you?
It was kind of like one of those kooky stories, just like a little kid riding around in the city, and it is actually kind of a funny story. So I had this little like BMX bike and just riding around, and then this guy was following me home, like this middle-aged man in a white van followed me home, and like I ran inside because
Stranger danger.
Yeah, like I did something wrong. And he parks and he gets out and he knocks on the door, and I'm like hiding. And he talks to my dad. And he's like, "Hey, I've seen your kid around the neighborhood riding around, and we have this like track program for kids." And then I was in Detroit, and so that's kind of how I started.
Wow.
And then
Okay.
I grew up like riding on the track and stuff as a little kid, but I was never super serious about it just because you're a kid. And
Yeah.
Went to school and went to high school, and so dabbled in kind of riding and racing a lot, and then eventually I just kind of fell into it hard, like in college especially.
Road cycling, gravel,
Road.
track. Okay, road.
Started on the track, and the track is a very interesting thing. I don't know if you if you swam or you like ran track in high school or whatever. Track is very interesting because like you race for like 10 minutes, but then you're hanging out at the track for like 4 hours.
So it's like one of those like sports where it's almost like a gear sport, right? Where you're just like, there's a whole community and you only do the activity. It's like windsurfing, sounds like. The track cycling. I used to windsurf, and like it takes like hours to set up your gear, and you go to the beach, you go out and back a couple times, and then just like hang out at the beach.
So it was like I think it helped me a bit because it was very social, and I was like, oh, everyone's a weird little kid, right? So to be around people like that was really fun and like a good way to develop as a person.
Yeah.
But then when I fell into it, I really kind of did a lot of racing, and then I stopped. I stopped maybe, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. I just stopped, and I just focused on, because it's very intense, I think. So I focused, job and all that stuff, and then this opportunity.
Overrated.
Yeah, I know, your job, work. But it's funny because at the time I was working for Oakley, and so I was still kind of orbiting cycling.
Right.
And then I fell back. This opportunity came up with Cervelo, and I kind of was like, it was a good time for me because it was like everyone's bananas in the pandemic, right? So I started with Cervelo at the height of the pandemic, and we didn't have a building at the time. We were still moving from Toronto to Southern California, and so I'm remote, and everyone's going, kind of becoming hobbits in their little house, and just to have something that's engaging and interesting and something that was so familiar to me was nice. It was a good time for me to start.
And your background, though, is in mechanical engineering, where that's your degree, and you've been doing product development and design.
Yep.
Even when you were in Oakley, and you came to do that at Cervélo.
Yes. Not as much. So I'm not doing as much design as much as the product development team in helping with the road mapping and helping with prioritization and all that like fancy work and things like that. So I don't get into the CAD anymore.
Okay. So you're not in the CAD computer system designing bikes, but you're
not yet. So not right now. So I'm more helping with process and helping with managing the product portfolio and things like that.
So are you working with all the bikes, road bikes, gravel, everything, or specifically with? Yes. Okay. Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about that. Like, what's the day to day?
Well, the day to day, especially with the, the focus, the brand ethos is, make riders faster, right? So I think the very obvious focus is anything that's raced, so the road bikes, the time trial bikes, that is definitely a focus for us, and I think that's our core, core products performance, and of course the team is great, and racing it on that stage is great because it gives us like our platform, it gives us relevancy, but then just underneath that is the admission that like not everybody races, So, and you don't have to race to be into performance bikes,
right?
So, just below that, or, something that really started right before I got here was focusing on experiential categories. So modern roads, so like our Caledonias, Asperos, the gravel. Gravel was a huge deal, in 2020. It really exploded. And then we also have, things like some of the triathlon bikes are kind of classified as, because not everyone's trying to win the Ironman. Sometimes they're just racing against themselves, So they're on their own discovery. So something like the P Series is definitely in that experiential category.
Which bikes are the riders on the tour on? Which model?
So they are on S5 that's the Aero road bike, and then the R5, which is our lightweight climbing bike.
Okay.
And the P5, which is the time trial bike, the spaceship.
Yes.
And then for certain events, they also use the Soloist, which is a little bit different bike. Than it's a little bit more of an all-rounder. And
okay.
See it at Roubaix. We'll have the Soloist. So, and you'll see a whole mix of bikes. I think especially now with modern tire technology, they're not looking for like giant clearance. They can actually ride quite a bit, and modern frame design actually has quite a bit of accommodation for tires up to like 30.
Oh wow, they're on. So,
big stuff. So
shout out to our partners at HVMN and Ketone IQ. I am a big fan of Ketone IQ and exogenous ketones for racing, training, and everyday health. They give you extra energy, extra focus, and metabolic flexibility. But what exactly are ketones, you ask? Ketones are a fourth macronutrient, like carbs, protein, and fat. They also are fuel for your brain and clean energy without sugar or caffeine. I use one shot of Ketone IQ 30 minutes before I head out into a workout or training session. Another one 60 minutes later, and so on. I also sometimes take this just to focus during my workday. And for all my athlete viewers, there's no need to ditch your carbs. You can add exogenous ketones and Ketone IQ to your existing nutrition and fueling plan. Totally different kind of energy. HVMN and Ketone IQ are used by Olympic athletes like Des Linden, world champion triathlete Sam Laidlow, and top world tour cycling team Visma Lisa Bike. If you're ready to get on board and level up your nutrition and fueling plan, I've got a code for you. hvmn.com/Marni for 30% off your first subscription order. Link in the show notes. That's so interesting. I know that I don't know. I mean, the tire size is just like the bigger the better, but like the less air in the tires.
It has more volume but lower pressure.
Yes, thank you. So, I have like I still am riding on 26 tires for my bikes, but that's because I have older bikes. So, I mean, I do have two newer bikes, but yeah,
that's I would say that's relevant right now. Like I ride on anything from 25 to sometimes 30, but on my road bikes, it's usually like right
Yeah.
around 28, 29.
Yeah.
Um, and I grew up on like crazy tire pressures. You're at the track, like trying to put 120 PSI into it.
Yeah.
And now I'm running like 55,
Yeah.
45. I'm like,
How does that change? Like, I mean, and if this is something that you don't want to talk about, but I'm
no.
just curious, like have the tires changed? Have the wheels have changed? Like, because when I started my foray into triathlon and cycling, I was riding on 25s, Continental 5000s, and
Mhm.
pumping it to 105 because right,
That's what
but
you did.
because I'm tiny, but still, like, I was pumping to 105, and then front wheel, back wheel, and now I have bigger wheels, like bigger actual, like the wheels are the Zip 300s or something. So they're bigger than the traditional aluminum wheel. And I still have the tires, the 26s on there, but I'm pumping it to 90.
Yeah. No, I think
Different. Yeah.
I think the big change is the industry went to wider rim widths.
Okay.
You're at like anywhere from like 23 to 25 inner rim width, and then along with that, the tire manufacturers really decided to take advantage of that. So the tires are now designed to be on those wider rims. So you've got this balance of more volume. You can now run lower pressure, and then I think the tire technology has really come along to that rubber technology has come along to reduce the rolling resistance. Yeah, tubeless was a big deal too for wheels. And there's always this debate about tubeless and tubed, and like
Right.
I get it's not as easy as just throwing a tube in there and stuff like that. But I think the benefits really outweigh the the extra maintenance that you have to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm still riding on tubes. Like, I have tubeless wheels, tubeless tires, tubeless wheels. But I have not made the jump. Maybe this summer. I mean, you have, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a learning curve for sure. For
Really?
sure.
Okay.
Yeah, just because you have to learn like because the sealant is, somewhat perishable and like having enough sealant and being able to install it. It's a different game, but it's pain in the butt.
It's better.
But like I said, the benefits far outweigh that extra maintenance cycle.
Because if you get a flat tire, it like automatically sort of fills in the gap where you might be yes and no. I don't know.
Usually it does.
Usually, unless you get
Usually
like
it
a
does.
splint in your tire or something.
Yeah. And if you have your like whole sealant level figured out and everything is good, like I've gotten home and I'm like, oh, why is my like bike all covered in this in the sealant? Because it punctured and it leaked a little bit and then it sealed and then I didn't know any different. So it actually works.
Awesome. And so, what Cervelo are you riding day to day?
Day to day, I like riding the S5. The S5 is like definitely my favorite bike.
All right, awesome. And now, just this past year, Cervelo came out with an e-bike with cutting edge design and called the Rouvida. So,
Yeah,
talk to me about that, because when we met in New York City, right, we went for a ride.
yeah.
It is an awesome bike, and honestly, no one would ever be able to tell it was an e-bike, except if you're on it like me, going 26 miles an hour.
Yeah, it's funny. That's my second favorite bike to ride, and not for it. So, which part do you want to talk about first? Because I think there was this whole like philosophical battle that we had about doing an e-bike because e-bikes come along with a lot of like baggage. You
Yeah,
know,
let's talk about that, because even as an athlete, right, you're kind of like, oh, I'm not going to ride an
no
e-bike.
way. Like that's for my joke is like, don't call it a medical device. Like
Yeah,
it's not for people that are less. It's not
yeah.
for sure, that's people are going to do that, for sure. Um, and
I'm,
let's be honest, this was like this was one of my first projects kind of at the driving forward as like here's kind of the vision for this product. Um, And, you know, there was a lot of debate about it because it wasn't thought of as a performance bike. And let's be honest, this is 2020, so e-bikes and e-mobility are blowing up. So, you know, at a core of it, definitely was a business opportunity that was
Yeah.
presented to. And so looking back on it, I wanted to make sure we're going to do this because there's an opportunity here. We're going to do it like we would do it, you know, our way, and then fling it out into the world and let's see what the people do with it, like the users, because I think it's more than just because you can't go fast enough anymore. I would say that is that's the bike that I have the most fun on because it's like that going fast is fun. You know?
Yeah, and I also think it like really opens up the door for new riders too, for new cyclists to try the bike. But you know, for people that already have a Cervelo or any bike, you know, like me, I have a road bike, I have a TT bike. You know, you know, if I'm gonna zip around and want to get somewhere faster, the e-bike is definitely the most efficient way, especially in a city like New York, right? Where to take a taxi somewhere that is like 4 miles, it's like LA now. I mean, 4 miles is easy, right? That's like a 15-minute bike ride, but it could be a 30-40 minute cab ride in New York now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. And so I've been riding around on e-bikes on City Bike a lot. You know, I mean, it's not my ideal scenario because they're falling apart and there's never docks and whatever. But I find, you know, when I first, like, my mindset was a lot like the Cervélo diehard cyclist that's, you know, in it for the high tech bike and wants to pedal. But once I started, I saw there was a huge, tremendous benefit for e-biking around the city and anywhere, really.
Yeah, not that you want to park a $10,000 e-bike on the
No,
street.
no, I don't. Let's be clear. I ride around New York City and I only go places okay, so on the city bike, it's fine.
Yeah.
But I do have another e-bike that I only ride when I know I can park it inside. So
Yeah.
I don't park. Even though the company is like, you can park it outside, don't worry. And I have 2 locks. I'm not parking it outside. I watched like 10 YouTube videos on how to lock my bike. Never going to happen.
No. And you know,
It's hard. It's
to your earlier point about, you know, bringing people into cycling, I think there's people that have a lot of the same brand ethos around, you know, us, like performance minded individuals that are in some neighboring sport, you know, like
Yeah.
and I think if we look at, and this is what I got excited about, is if you look at what happened with e-mountain biking, where it brought a lot of people that wouldn't normally ride bikes into the sport. So maybe someone that is using our bike for whatever reason, but then they get into cycling.
Yeah.
And they buy an S5 or an R5 or whatever. So I think that is the hard part with the pandemic. And I usually speak of these like lost generations of cyclists, you know, so had all these people riding bikes, and now what are they doing? Are they back to playing golf? Like, you know, where did they go? And so I think keeping those people in the sport is important. So, you know, if someone comes to the sport because of the Rouvida and because of the e-bikes, and hopefully they stick around, because I think there's so many like lost generations of cyclists that are doing something else. Like the fixie kids, you know, like that's when I grew up. Like there's so many of them aren't riding bikes anymore.
Fixies, they're not?
Well, I think when you know, in my generation, in the city in Chicago, so I lived in Chicago for a number of years, you know, you had this whole kind of explosion. And then same with the fixed gear criteriums aren't happening anymore. So I kind of feel like at the time as like an elite racing snob who I was, I like completely like looked down on the fixie kids. I was like, nah, with your little handlebars and skidding, what are you doing?
No gears. What's going on over there?
Yeah, like no brakes. Come on, that's unsafe. And I think I really kind of like poo-pooed the whole idea. And then now looking back on it, I'm like, oh man, like that was actually the next generation that I kind of like soundly rejected, because you know they'd show up at the track and I'm like, who are these guys? You know?
Yeah.
And
But
so now, in hindsight, maybe I'm just getting more mature.
uh,
Um, I think that was in my mind, that's a generation we lost.
it goes 28 miles an hour top
Yes,
speed, or yeah.
that's the class one in the U.S. is 28. I think it's like 55 kilometers uh,
Okay.
in the Queens units, but it's right around 28 mile an hour. And it turns off the power at that point. Uh, there is no, I think when you go to Europe and some parts of Canada, it's a class one, which is fun, but it's not as much fun because it's only 18 and a half miles an hour.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool to be able to go that fast on a flat. I mean, I ride, on a downhill, it's easy to get that fast, but on a flat, I mean, that's a good chop.
Yes, it is. It is. It is definitely. I think that the thing too is like when you get to that speed. Uh, Speaking of riding around and commuting and stuff, and you get to that speed, it changes how you're riding because of stoplights and things. You can
Yeah.
time it. You have so much power on tap, and you're going a little bit faster. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, I zip up and down the West Side Highway. Typically, I love when I have to meet someone on the West Side. I try to set up all my meetings there because it's just really efficient. Like, we rode near my neighborhood when you were in New York
Hmm.
City. We were down in the Battery Park Financial District area, and I just stay on that path. Like, I try not to ride in the traffic or anything because it's like crazy, like on the side streets. But I mean, if I have to, I do, but you have to go like a lot slower. But I mean, I think it's like such a great addition for someone in the city. So talk to me about some of the tech specs on the bike because I like geek out on that stuff. So I don't know if my listeners do. I think they do. But I mean, you have like a super fancy motor. You've got like super fancy geometry. We kind of talked about the battery. So talk to me about some of the stuff we haven't mentioned.
So the battery, we've talked about the battery. I think for if you really want to nerd out on it, it's like the Ride 60 is 60 newton meters of torque, which is roughly maximum assist is like 450 watts. If any watt nerds out there,
Yeah.
and actually the Fazua system you can actually link up with your Garmin because it has an onboard power meter.
Oh,
So
okay.
show what your power is, and it won't necessarily show what the bike is putting out, but it'll show your power.
Oh,
Uh,
that's good to know.
yeah, it's an interesting training tool, and we can get into that later because I have a whole
Yeah.
kind of soapbox about training with e-bikes. I think they're a fantastic tool. The geometry of the bike itself, it's actually kind of we have two models, a
Right.
gravel and a road, but only one frame, and actually the flip chips are what enable you to kind of switch back and forth between the two modes. And on the one hand, you would say, oh, you're using flip chips to make more tire clearance, but it's not just tire clearance. It's actually about geometry.
Okay.
Because on the road you want something that's really quick handling, but then on the gravel bike you want something that is a little bit more stable and a little bit more mild to steering. So when you use the flip chips, it actually modifies the geometry, drops the bottom bracket just a little bit because you have a little bigger diameter tires.
Okay.
It's not just bigger tires. It actually changes the handling characteristics of the bike.
Oh, interesting. Because I always wonder about that, right? Because certain bikes that you ride have much more, like a better handling, like turning, much more flexible when you're on a ride. And like a lot of the time on the TT bike, I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
I didn't realize it until I've always had a road bike, and I actually put aero bars on, and I don't know, I'm just like a roadie, but
Yeah.
I kind of like, even though I've been doing triathlon for 10 years, I don't do full distance. So I survive the 70 distance, 70.3, and it never really bothered me, but I wanted to get faster. So I got a TT bike and I was riding to practice, and I'm like, we have some hairpin turns on some of the bridges here, like nothing beyond that, but just going over the GW, there's like some bike path stuff. And I was like, whoa, I had to get off my bike and walk it around the corner because it was such a tight turn and my bike was like just not responding. But
Yeah,
on the, yeah,
it's funny. It's kind of like you're like driving your F1 car to 7-Eleven, right? It's like you can do it, like it'll get you there, but it's kind of a handful. And a part of that is you're probably on your aero bars and your base extension. Your hands are super low, and your center of gravity is all kind of like,
Yeah.
and you're just so low and such an aggressive position. So I can understand. I remember those bridges you come down and it's just a big hairpin because it loops
Yeah.
all around. Yeah, I can see that being a total handful.
But on the Rouvida, like I didn't feel any of that when we were riding around in the city. Like I felt like it had some really good like turning radius and stuff. I mean, we didn't really do a lot of turns, but I could tell like when we were just turning onto the highway or yeah.
Yeah. It has probably has a little bit wider handlebar, and you're a little
Yeah.
bit more upright. And the geometry is just a little bit less aggressive than a full-blown TT bike. So yeah, I can
Yeah.
totally see that. I can see
So
that.
who do you see, like, who are you seeing? Like, who are your customers for the e-bike? Are you bringing people over from your road and tri community, or is it just a totally new customer?
It's mostly coming over currently. We just launched it in December.
Right, it
So
just came out.
it just came out. So mostly it's coming over from a road community, that is familiar with either the segments we were in, like the performance segments, or our brand itself. So um, I think road bike still has to explode in the mind of the serious
Athlete, yeah.
cyclists.
I remember when e-bikes first sort of started coming onto the radar of cyclists, that there was someone, a podcaster, who was talking about how people were getting upset on Strava because people were on e-bikes and they weren't calling it an e-bike. But I think that's kind of cleared up now. And you were mentioning training on an e-bike, so maybe those two things go together. But yeah, talk to me a little bit about that.
So I think, if we look, my vision in the future,
Yeah.
is that, our they're a lot like you. They've got the road bike, they've got the TT bike, they've got the gravel bike, they've got all the bikes, and they've got a quiver. And I think if you're serious about training, I think the e-bike would be an actual really good um, addition to that quiver. And the question is why? Because I think, like I said before, the serious cyclists kind of poo-poo it, like, oh, that's cheating or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying go out and smoke all the KOMs on the local Strava segments, but if you look at it from either, on the very basic, it's a recovery tool.
Right.
So I think on the days when I still need the volume, but my legs are like blown up, and sometimes, especially like a lot of athletes, just can't help themselves. Like I remember when I was coaching athletes, I'm like, you're supposed to be doing like submax numbers. What are you doing? You're in this weird hard tempo day. And the delivery of the power can be programmed in the Rouvida, so you can actually do a fast ride, but it can still be considered a recovery day for you.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's pretty cool. And then
Yeah.
I think, and I haven't quite tapped into this, and I'm no exercise physiologist whatsoever, but for me personally, because I was on the track for so long, I really love doing motor pacing.
Okay.
Motor pacing, behind a scooter or whatever is usually like a very high vascular load, like high heart rate,
Mm-hmm.
not a high like muscular load, and it creates this speed in your legs. And I feel that that the Rouvida and the e-bikes do something similar. So I hope, or I expect that we start seeing more athletes use this as a training tool, as a secondary or a tertiary.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like kind of like what a treadmill does, right? Like when you're on the treadmill, if you want to improve your speed outside,
Mm-hmm.
you can mimic that on the treadmill, but then you have to take it outside, right?
Yeah.
And so we all have trainers, bike trainers, but most of us, and you can put your bike on there and do some high cadence, get to speed, but you don't really know what it feels like till you're outside. And in order to feel it, you have to feel it. So that's a great advantage of being on a like performance e-bike, that you can get out there and feel what it's like to go at that speed, and then like understand in your body what you need to do.
Yeah. I Yeah, that's exactly a great analogy. I haven't run much, but it's now that I'm thinking about it, that is very much very similar.
Pretty cool. And so now, everybody knows Cervelo. Such a beautiful bike, a great brand between all the bikes everywhere on the road, the Tour de France, the Tour, World Tour, and all the famous cyclists riding them. Where did this company start? And talk to me about that, 'cause I didn't even know that.
Originally in Toronto, Canada, actually, two gentlemen, Gerard Ruman and Phil White, they went to school together at McGill University, and their first bike, there's pictures of it online, was like their senior project, I think. It's called the and that's pretty iconic. And then at that point, they actually started doing triathlon bikes. Because I believe it was Gerard was at the time really into triathlon bikes.
Yeah.
So they started doing triathlon bikes, and then at some point, there was enough of a performance advantage. And this was back in the day of when professional teams would race any bike that they wanted, even if it wasn't necessarily their sponsor's bike.
Right.
So there was a number of like high-profile races that were done on Cervelos badged as different bikes. So that was kind of in to the road scene as a TT bike, and then from there they grew the product line to include road bikes and cyclocross bikes and all that. And so that was in Toronto. The company kind of blew up there, just got bigger and bigger, and was doing all their assembly there in Toronto. And then fast forward a few years later, they actually ran a professional world tour team called the Cervélo test team.
Okay.
So really elevated the profile of the company on the road side.
That's really cool though about the history of Cervelo, because I don't know why. I think all bikes are made in Italy. It's just like, I feel like Italy is like, I don't know the history of cycling, but I feel like that's kind of like coffee, bikes, Italy, espresso. I don't know.
It's the whole the story of it is just so romantic, and being it's a European sport, and we're just gonna go and first we're gonna go ride and drink some espresso in the town square out of like little cups, and then we'll go on our ride and we'll come back and we'll drink some wine and eat some bread. It's gonna be great.
Yeah, totally. I know, just like off the topic of drinking coffee and like riding bikes, but I know that Cervelo is really big in the space of sustainability, and it's an increasing thing in the world of cycling, from apparel to product design. It's super important for shoppers, for consumers to buy into that. So how does Cervelo approach eco-friendly design and manufacturing?
It's difficult, because the reality is a lot of our products are being manufactured in Asia. So we have some really great partners in Asia. Like we don't manufacture the frames themselves, but I think it's something that the cycling industry is trying to wrap our heads around. It's not as straightforward for us because we make durable goods, right? We're not making clothes and things like that, and it's a struggle. I think the one thing that was something that I had to wrap my head around was recycling of just batteries are a huge problem for e-mobility devices on so many levels. Safety.
I mean, yeah,
but recycling is another one. We've actually partnered with a great company that every one of our bikes has a recycling program planned for at end of life for the Rouvidas. But no, I think packaging is, for us, packaging is the next frontier for us for sustainability. Just because you have these huge bike boxes around, so that is definitely, we do a little bit with carbon recycling, but carbon is definitely a difficult material to work with.
Yeah, I mean, I always think you could just give your bike to someone and repurpose it.
Yeah.
Do you have any extra bikes over there that you need to repurpose?
I know. In all seriousness, I think that's the difference between any of these high end bikes versus like something you buy in Alibaba for $300 and you have a shipping.
Right.
the reality is no one's throwing a Cervelo P5 into a landfill.
Right. Like,
It's gonna go live. Someone else take this and love it also. So I think that is the one good thing about these high-end bicycles is they have a secondary market, a tertiary market after.
yeah. And they have a long life.
Yeah, like if you look at the bike count that we do at Kona, like a
Hmm.
lot of, and we're still at the top of that list of the bike count. But then if you look real close and you dig in, a lot of those bikes are older. They're not all brand new. You have
Yeah.
some P2s, P3s out there, and they live a long life. The future, to some degree, that like kind of cycle that you just described
Yeah.
for us is like looking at circular design, like
Yeah.
what's the second and third customer's experience look like, and I think that's a bigger thing that we can't just tackle on our own, because
Right.
that includes the component manufacturers and things like that too. But
Right. Like
it's
you could partner with the pros closet or something. I mean, right? I mean,
no, actually we do.
you do.
Some the future of a lot of our development bikes, they live on in the secondary market, and it's tough because the hard part is, as a development team, we consume a lot of bicycles. Like,
Right.
and a lot of the stuff that we do, you can't necessarily just sell outright because they're samples. So
Right.
what do we do with those? And a lot of them live on either as test bikes for our staff to ride, or
Hmm.
actually when we do have to destroy things because for various reasons, we actually work with a carbon recycler in South Carolina, where they
Okay.
actually take the bikes and then they recycle the material, and I forget if it's downcycle or upcycle, but they use it into other building materials.
That's amazing. I mean, I think there's a lot we can all do. I mean, and also like just to the point of like getting rid of a bike when you're done with it. Like I always give my bikes to friends or people that
Mhm.
like need a bike and want a bike, and like I currently have a bike I'm getting rid of, and I want to find it a good home.
I mean, that's a great way to
It's in
get
storage. Yeah.
in sport for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. That's my jam though. But I like someone was like, "Oh, you should sell it." I'm like, honestly, it's like not really worth any money, and
Hmm.
I'd rather just like find it a good home and know that it's being used, as
Yeah.
opposed to just like trying to make like a couple $100. What do you see as the future of like the world of cycling and bike technology?
Well, we are so performance focused, right? So
Hmm.
I think uh, gravel is still trying to figure itself out and still growing up. I think gravel is going to get faster and faster. Um,
Hmm.
I, I think I won't say professionalism because they are very professional, the races and the racers but I think the level of organization is going to increase and the level of competition is going to increase. You have a lot of crossover athletes. So from the bike development side, I think there's going to be a little bit more of a focus on aerodynamics in the gravel realm. It's already
Yeah.
there, but I think it's going to get more and more focused on. I think tires and wheels
Yeah.
specifically is going to be interesting. Um, there's the big debate about hookless versus hooked right now, but that's a
I
whole nother.
literally had that conversation this weekend.
Oh,
Yeah.
a whole nother.
It's tough.
It's a
Yeah.
whole nother. Like I don't even want. We have to. The reality is like there's pushing the envelope and then there's being safe. Right now, we're just waiting to see how this all shakes out, because now there are some concerns. I don't know if they're founded or unfounded. There's just some, I'll call them observations out in the world, but
Hmm.
at racing incidents. I think we're going to hit a point where tires are going to start stabilizing, tire widths, because now they're
Okay.
like wider, 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 and then
Right.
what point does it stop?
Yeah.
And I
Well,
know,
so I mean, when you build a bike, like you have to build the frame so that it fits a certain tire size.
yeah, there's a whole requirement from ISO, of how much tire clearance. So if you advertise X amount of tire width, like this is your maximum, I believe it's 4 millimeters a side has to be your clearance. So when you start doing that, you start crowding things like there's the very obvious thing is like your fork bigger and things like that. But then you start crowding the drivetrain, right? So you start
Yes.
to you get these really weird chainstay clearances down by the crank and things like that. So I think at some point that'll settle down.
Yeah.
And then we'll be at a good spot for a while.
I feel like my old bike still needs 25s, even though I'm riding 26s on it. Like, I feel like it's cutting it close. Like, there's not a lot of clearance, but
Yeah. So hopefully that there's still a lot of benefits to the riders, and
yeah.
once you start to get above like a 35, that's a different bike then.
Yeah. That's I don't know if that's not a road bike.
From a technology standpoint or from a frame design standpoint, I think people are going to be mad about this and people are going to cringe. I think integration, as much as people say it's like a pain in the butt to maintain it, I think from a design standpoint, there's definitely some advantages to integration, like internal routing and things like that. I know everyone hates it, but
like internal routing of the cables and
yeah, even like I think in the past you would only get this high level of integration with like the highest end bicycles.
Yeah.
But I think even when we start to talk about like mid-level bikes,
Mm-hmm.
the expectation from the consumer is that there's integration there too.
Yeah, like
the challenge for us as designers is to make sure that number one, it's like relatively easy to live with. There's no disadvantages to the benefit, and then at the same time, you don't want the price point to increase too much.
right.
Like, there's a cost for everything. We're just trying not to make it too big.
And do you have to educate like all the bike techs across the world to understand how to change a cable then in a system where it's integrated, or how does that?
No, they're pretty good. I think
Okay.
it's pretty standard fare nowadays for bike mechanics to know that. But it's definitely it's one of the unfortunate drawbacks to technology marching on, right? Like
Yeah.
you can't go work on your car. Like good luck trying to change your own oil now, and
Right.
that's just because the cars have progressed and progressed and progressed. And depending on who you ask, if you're a technocrat or a retro grump,
I love that.
it's like, yes.
I might have to steal that from you. Technocrat, retro, grump.
Yeah, it's it depending on where the side of the fence you land. So I think from a design side,
Yeah.
it just makes bikes look so clean.
Yeah.
So beautiful. Like I'm all for it, but I also know the cost because I work on my own bikes. I'm just like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah, and also like integrating like water systems into the bike.
Exactly. Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
I have a bike that I don't have a bike like that. I could not live. I couldn't function. Like, I know it's like super fancy and very cool. I need my water bottle and I need to clean it. I know that's like lame. Yeah.
Well, I think the reality too of it is like, it's very good and there's some benefits from integrating a hydration system into a frame. You get improved aerodynamics, you get arguably easy access, but then if you actually look at the usage pattern in racing, it's really difficult. You go up to a neutral aid station and they have water bottles.
Right.
What do you do? Like boop, boop,
pour
boop.
it in. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's
not efficient.
The reality of it. Yeah. Of living with something like that.
It's one of the things where you save time now or save time later.
Yeah. Different if you have like an army of professional mechanics.
I was just going to say, yeah.
Like that's fine. But if you're just like someone that's like trying to set your bike up in the Holiday Inn Express the night before the triathlon, like, ah! Yeah.
You know my number. What are some big lessons as a cyclist, because I know you're a cyclist, that you take from your recreational passion for cycling and you use to elevate or empower yourself every day at work?
Oh, me personally?
Yeah, you. Yeah. Personally. Like, how do you use cycling to be fueled for success in your daily life or at work? What lessons?
It's funny, my relationship with riding bikes is gone up and down. And
Yeah.
I think it's, for me personally, the hardest part of my ride is typically the distance from my couch to the front door.
Yeah.
That is
I
just
feel it. I feel you. Yeah.
and for me, um, I can't just go and ride a bicycle around. I do it to some degree for I always call it I'm going out to exercise the demons, right? Like
Yeah.
so, um, that's part of that is good for me mentally.
Yeah.
But for me to have at least in the back of my head some goal for the year, as
Okay.
like I'm training for life, or I'm training for this event, or I'm going to go do this thing, and I just want to be prepared. So I have a good. I don't necessarily want to win anymore as much as I just don't
Yeah.
want. I want to have a good experience.
So do you
So
have, yeah.
so for me, like that sounds so simple to have a goal, but I think that really kind of translates into my professional life too. I think for um, for Cervelo as a whole, like when we sit down and kind of forecast and talk about product roadmap, there's definitely a 3-year, 4-year goal. So that helps me.
Yeah.
But then for me personally to have a goal um, keeps my motivation up for sure. And it sounds so simplistic, but otherwise I'm just out there riding around in circles for no apparent reason.
I get that. I mean, and you mentioned you were a coach, right? So it's important to have that
A long
goal.
time ago, in a
Long time ago.
galaxy far, far away, I was a coach.
I feel like, even like for me too, I mean, I think that's kind of normal, right? Like you just need to have something that you're working towards. Like it's just not like you're just going to go out and ride. I get that. And during the pandemic, it was super challenging, right? Because we didn't know when races were going to come back or anything. Are you training for something now
Um,
besides life?
uh, I usually try to do a little bit of end of the year gravel racing
Okay.
just to go check it out. Like I did the BWR series
Mm-hmm.
last year, and then I usually end at like Mammoth Mountain has this cool little gravel race called the Mammoth Tough, which is
Mm-hmm.
fairly local. It's a car ride, and I can just go there and hang out and be fairly anonymous and just have a good time.
Yeah.
Those two are late in the year, so I have a little catching up to do. It's been like rainy and crappy here.
Yeah. Same. Although it looks like it's clearing up now. So I was like staged my workout for once the rain clears. I like when it's cloudy but not raining. Like I like that overcast weather for training. I
Yeah,
don't know why. I feel like it's not too hot. The temperature is the temperature.
yeah, yeah. It's
um,
and plus I'm in California too, so like we're super soft, so it's like can't go out. It's 59 degrees, so cold.
oh my God.
We're the worst. When it rains, we're the worst because it's like everyone gets depressed 4 days before the forecast is supposed to get it. Like this, it rained this weekend, proper rain, like Saturday and Sunday. But
Yeah.
already by Wednesday, everybody had given up. They're just like, ugh.
I thought New York was bad.
You're like,
I, I love talking to other people that are athletes. It's like, honestly, it's just such a community. I mean, like you saying that makes total sense to me. Like I check the weather. I must have checked the weather like 6 times today just to make sure that at this window of time I can go out for like a 2-hour run because, I don't want it to rain, but if it rains, and then also like we have beautiful weather this weekend and I
Mhm.
didn't do my long run, which I was like, oh, I'm wasting a great day. Like, do you ever feel like that? Like you're
Oh yeah,
tired and you're like, oh.
yeah. You feel guilty about it.
Yeah, all
Like,
day. I felt horrible.
I squandered this day. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. So you're thinking about doing the Mammoth and are you going to do BWR again?
It's too early this year, but
Yeah.
at some point, I will.
Have
So
you ever done Unbound?
no.
I don't know. I've been like thinking about getting into gravel, but
I
it's a lot of thinking and very little doing.
I think that's what kind of like stopped me from riding for a long time. This was in the explosion of Leadville. Like
Oh,
that's when I stopped. And
yeah.
I did Leadville and I prepped for it for, a year and a half and I went to training camps at altitude and I did all this stuff. And then on race day, I was just like nothing. And I think I died a little bit that day. And I just remember those long ultra events. I just remember being out there like, I'm never gonna do this again.
Yeah.
Like I joke because I kind of like, what you want to get out of your sport at the time is really different for me now, where like that idea of doing, Leadville or doing these ultra marathon events, the joke that I have is like, aside from sleeping, I can't think of anything I want to do for more than 3 hours.
Yeah.
Like even like, like the bad stuff. Like I don't want to like, I don't want to do that for 3 hours. I don't want to eat for 3 hours. I don't want to drink for 3 hours. Like I just want to sleep for 8 hours, but there's nothing, most of it that I don't want to do for more than 3 or 4 hours.
I know. I think for me, it's like 7. I get out there, like I'll do like, that's a bad day for me on the try 70.3, but yeah, but I'm doing 3 different sports. So there's that.
Yeah.
So I can't do one sport for that. I would lose it. Like except for, well, I shouldn't say that because I also like enjoy cycling, but yeah.
I did. So Leadville, it's like an out and back course. And I just remember, so the high point is at the midpoint. So you're climbing up to like, I want to say 12,000 feet.
That is intense.
On the climb up, I'm like, this isn't going well.
You're like, why did I sign up for this?
Yeah.
I want a helicopter out of here.
And I knew I could feel my body was just like, it was like stuck in second gear. I couldn't go any faster and I wasn't going any slower. And now I'm just like trudging along.
Yeah.
And I do the climb and I come back and it's like, maybe my legs will come back and just never. And so it turned it like, I want to say I was out there for like 10 hours or something. I'm just like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like, nope. Just
That's
not
hard.
having a good time. So no more. I have no real desire to Unbound. Maybe if I could get in something that's like Steamboat or something, or do some like crazy adventure thing, like go out and do like a mid-length event, like they have Finland gravel, which would be fun. Go to Finland.
Yeah.
Or do something crazy like go to Iceland and do an event, but.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I mean, I think that's awesome. I mean, I think it's fun to have like goals and things that light you up, right? If it doesn't light you up, why would you do it? It's supposed to be having fun, right? But you work for a cool company. I mean, you're in the right place for cycling.
Well, I think it's like I said, it's good for me personally to get back to some level of, figure out what my relationship with cycling is now.
Yeah.
Because I was kind of
evolves.
I was definitely burnt. And then I personally, it's a good spot for me to come in and help with the company when they moved. Like the team is fantastic. Not the pro team, but the product
development team
is fantastic. And the company is very much on the upswing right now. So it's a very exciting time to be here. And I'm super grateful.
I'm so psyched that we met in New York and it was so awesome riding with you. Well, Ryan, this is so great. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Okay. Thanks, Marni.